Cuts and releases, or better yet, waivers and releases is a better way for me to put that. All right, we got cut day down to the 53-man roster for our Chicago Bears. Definitely going to talk about the players that were waived and released. We're going to talk about perhaps the players that will land or we prefer to land on the practice squad, and also other groupings and positional groups that may need a player that's been waived or released on other teams' rosters, perhaps to come in. Got my guys with me. You already know we got our Bears insider, Josh Schrock. Of course, our Bears beat reporter, Alex Shapiro. Tony and Claire running the show. We got the full team together for this episode. So let's start off right now, guys. If anybody doesn't know, I'm going to do a real quick run through the list. Austin Reed, Brendan Bates, Theo Bendit, Jake Curran, Jamiri, correct me if I mispronounce these names, Jamari Cromar, Deshaun Mallory, Micah Baskerville, Carl Jones Jr., Leon Jones, Reddy Stewart, Torrance, Cameron Lyons, Corliss Waitman, and these are the guys. Those were the guys that were waived. No, those are the guys that were waived. Yes, guys that were released. Brett Rippon, and these are guys that have had more than 4 years. Brett Rippon, and they can be straight. They can go to a team straight away. They don't have to go through waivers if you don't know that. Brett Rippon, Kari Blasingame, Colin Johnson, we want you back. Stephen Carlson, Vontae Collins, Brian Cowart, Greg Stroman Jr., I will miss you, sir. Adrian Colbert, Alex will miss you, and Tavares Moore are the guys that were waived. Guys, right there, anybody that stands out to you that was waived or cut today from this roster?
I mean, not really. I think Blassingame's probably the one that would stand out, but he's expected back once they kind of do some procedural stuff with putting Scales on IR. But other than that, I think it was pretty cut and dry, which is pretty much tells you where this roster is at from, where it's been. I think 2 years ago we probably did this podcast and there were 25 spots that were open. We were like, man, we don't know how they're going to fill this roster out. They got to find bodies to play. And I think today arrived and I looked at it and it was like, yeah, I have a pretty good sense of what they're going to do. I thought keeping 6 edge rushers, which we'll get into, was pretty interesting just because the long search for anyone not named Montez Sweat to get to the quarterback will continue. But as far as surprises, really just Blasingame, and he'll be back probably in a day or two.
Yeah, I agree. There's no one player where you're like, oh, wow, this dude made it or this dude didn't. Like maybe Greg Stroman, but even then, not really, because Greg Stroman is a dude who has bounced between the practice squad and the active roster, even though every time he's on the active roster and needs to play, he's been great. He's just, I'm sure they'll love to have him on the practice squad again so that in case they need him, he'll be ready to go. But yeah, I'll echo the Kari. I guess the Velus Jones thing. Velus Jones is one enigmatic name, and I'm not entirely surprised that he's on the team. Like part of me is and part of me isn't, but he to me was the one biggest question that like you could make a case or you could see like I guess a prevailing path for each guy. But Velus Jones was like, are they going to keep the guy who is kind of intriguing as a running back? Are they going to keep the guy who was really good at kick return? Or are they going to cut the guy who is still muffing punts in kicks? I'm sorry, in year 3, where it's like, okay, this guy needed to have a super clean preseason, or so we thought. And 1 out of his 2 kick returns, he muffs it. So, it was like, which way are they going to go with Velus Jones? Obviously, the upside and the playmaking ability prevailed. But yeah, that was the one that I was laser focused on today.
Josh, you weren't here. We had a discussion, Alex and I was like, he's going to be here. Because I think now we clearly see Ryan Poles is going to give his guys, for the most part, 3 years, depending on which round they were drafted in. Maybe if you're an undrafted free agent or lower, that may be an issue, but he's going to give his guys 3 seasons to find out what he has in them. Now, I will say this is it for Velus. This is definitely.
How many times have we said that, though? How many times have we said this is it for Velus? And then
you're right.
He's back.
You're right. You're totally right. But I thought he was going to make the roster. I thought moving to running back, and we could say, well, we'll see. I thought it was like, still, they were stretching it to give him a little bit more runway, is what I thought. So that to me, if they left him at receiver, Alex, I think we would have known his ass was going to get cut. But like moving into running back is like, we still think maybe there's something that resides within Velus. Look, I want to ask you this before we get into because I definitely got to get into that defensive line, which you just mentioned, Josh, and suss that out. Guys, because you just mentioned Greg Stroman, Alex. Guys that you expect to go to other teams and guys you expect to end up on the practice squad, because there may be some teams now, particularly with the Bears being viewed as a team that, can fairly well not just pick up a defensive back, but also probably developmental, what they can do with a defensive back that teams may look for if they have a weak defensive backfield. Why not bring in one of these players and give them a run?
Yeah, I think Stroman's an easy one who I think will probably find a home elsewhere, I'd imagine, relatively quickly. I mean, he can play. He didn't get cut because he can't play. It's a numbers game. I'm sure they would have loved to have kept 7 defensive backs, all of whom are arguably starting caliber. I imagine he'll have no problem finding a job. I think on the flip side of that, I think Reddy Stewart is probably ticketed for the practice squad. I think they really liked what they saw from him. And you talk about developing defensive backs, right? Like they've done it with Josh Blackwell. They've done it with Jalen Jones. Terrell Smith is probably, he can start, right? There's just a log jam. And I think they kind of see that potential in Reddy Stewart. So I think he's a guy who's ticketed for the practice squad. I think tight end Brendan Bates is also probably really likely to be on the practice squad. I thought he had a really, really nice preseason. He might get interest elsewhere. And then, interested to see if Brett Rippon makes it to the practice squad. I think Austin Reed's a pretty easy one to get through, but are they going to put 2 guys on the practice squad? They love Brett Rippon. They love having a veteran in the QB room with Caleb Williams. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. And then Byron Cowart, right? I think Byron Cowart is an easy guy to try to sneak to the practice squad and then promote for week 1 because Zach Pickens is not going to be ready and give you some easy depth.
Real quick, do you think they should keep? You only have 16 spots on the practice squad, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think you should keep? Like, should you either go with the veteran and Brett Rippon and let Austin Reed go, or do you think they should keep both quarterbacks? That seems like a bit much to me when you only have 16 spots in there. Seems to be some desirable players that you may want to add to that practice squad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would only keep one. And I think Rippon's probably got value elsewhere. So who knows if he could just sign outright with someone who needs, quality veteran depth. So I would only keep one. And if it's one, it'll be Rippon. But if he's gone, they like Austin Reed enough to probably keep him on the practice squad.
I saw an article on USA Today. They had Brett Rippon listed as like the 4th best available cut quarterback that was out on the streets right now. Alex, who are your guys?
I literally co-sign everything Josh just said. When you posed that question, truly Josh rattled off all the top names and even the guys who could go, including Brett Rippon, who could have options. I will add 2 more to the mix. We already spoke a little about Adrian Colbert. He's a veteran dude who can contribute on special teams. He can probably help somebody. So he might go elsewhere. And then one more guy who I was just impressed with throughout camp. Obviously, there was never a punter battle on this team, but Corliss Waitman looked really good. Corliss Waitman to me was an NFL punter. And there were moments where it was like, oh, sweet punt. Yeah, new kid. He rules. And he'd be like, oh, wait, that was Waitman who kicked that ball. So punter watch. For the punter podcast, this has become a punter podcast ever since the Bears drafted Torrey Taylor. I think Corliss Waitman could help somebody else as well.
Just to make sure everybody, go ahead. What are you about to say?
Oh, I was going to say, what about your guy Baskerville? He come back on the practice squad?
Oh, he better.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy. So Amen made it. That was somebody, and they still retain Noah. That was a discussion that Alex and I had. With the lack of practice due to injuries that he had. But just to update everybody, if you don't know who's all left in the defensive back, since we were just defensive back heavy a second ago, you still have Blackwell, Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Jones, Terrell Smith, who Josh told you about, Tyreek Stevenson, Kevin Byard, of course, the vet that was brought in this offseason, Jaquan Brisker, Elijah Hicks, and Jonathan Owens, Simone Biles' husband.
It's probably the deepest group on this team, and it's probably not even close. All of those guys are legit NFL players. Elijah Hicks is a guy that, we were kind of down on over his first couple seasons and thought he had a ways to go. He looked so much better this summer, both in practice, both in training camp. He was taking significant reps, both at free safety and strong safety. So he looks like a legit safety 3, but then so is Jonathan Owens. And as long as we're calling out rando dudes for the practice squad, like the Hound, Michael Baskerville, let me throw out Jake Curran as a potential practice squad guy to, especially with Larry Borum hitting IR and not going to be available until week 5 at the absolute earliest. The Bears are going to want to make sure they're padded on the edges. And Karan Amagaji, like, how fast is he going to be able to catch up? Right, he made the roster. That was not a surprise. Everybody expected him to make the roster, especially as he returned to practice. But is he going to be able to catch up quickly enough that, like, if the Bears need a swing tackle and Larry Borum is down and Matt Pryor, they feel better about him at guard, you might want a guy like Jake Curran waiting in the wings.
Real quick, Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright. You heard Alex with Karan Agmengaji, Coleman Schultz, and of course, Doug Kramer still here, Doug Kramer Jr. Our guy, Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, Bill Murray, Ryan Bates, and Matt Pryor are the offensive linemen that have made the cut to the 53-man roster. One question. One thing that we all kind of talked about that may have been, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's improved or not, that there may have been a lack of depth at linebacker when you already have, of course, Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, our guy, Jack Sunborn, Amen. I'm not about to even do it. I know I can do it, but I'm not going to try. Noah Sewell. Thoughts about the backup guys now. Of course, we don't think they'll be starters and they're as good as the starters or as good as the starters, but thoughts on the depth that they have at the linebacking core right now.
Yeah, I still think kind of a question mark. I mean, Sewell is a great blitzer. The athleticism has never been an issue. The lateral movement to play anywhere other than Sam is kind of a question mark. I'd be worried if honestly, let's be honest though, if they lose TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, okay, whatever. We'll see you later. Who cares, right? I mean, Amen can probably fill in for one of those spots. If they lose both, yeah, Jack's versatile, but that's too much to lose. So, I think there's a slight depth issue, but it's the best they could have done. And if they lose 2 of those guys, they're up Schitt's Creek anyways.
Agreed. They can only probably afford to lose 1. Like if TJ Edwards goes down, you could probably get away with Amen sliding in there. If Tremaine goes down, you could probably get away with putting Sanborn in at Mike and then moving Noah Sewell to Sam for the 10 snaps a game they're going to use a Sam. But if both go down, you're talking about 2 cornerstones of this franchise in the middle of that defense, at least, and 2 guys who were incredibly valuable on that defense last year.
I want to get to the defensive line. Of course, the guys that they traded for and brought in, Darrell Taylor and Chris Williams, have made the team. They wouldn't have traded for him probably if they weren't. Montez Sweat, DeMarcus Walker, Daniil Hardy, Austin Booker, Dominique Robinson, Javon Dexter Sr., Andrew Billings, and Zach Pickens, that's injured right now, have all made the roster. Guys, thoughts on the guys that made it, but really, thoughts on the guys that made it, and is someone holding a spot if you still believe they're going to go out and look for someone that's released or on waivers right now to fill in these spots on from these other teams?
I don't know if they're going to go out and there's no one really out there. Are they going to go get Carl Lawson, who got cut today, who might be a practice squad guy? I don't know. Maybe they could have got Yannick Ngakoue. They clearly like Darrell Taylor better. I think the thing is, I think someone's just holding a spot for Jacob Martin, who was placed on IR, designated to return. He was really good early in camp before the toe injury. I think he had a 17% win rate last year for the Colts as a situational pass rusher. That's something they need. So someone's holding the spot for him. And then that's probably also where they're going to shave off, whenever they find a long snapper who's not named Patrick Scales, because someone's got to go once they find one. So, kind of interesting. They kept both Hardy and Dominique Robinson, but I think both those guys are on thin ice, and, Matt Eberflus is going to play the hot hand, and both those guys might be ice.
You answered my question right there, because I was going to say who's holding the spot. Out of the 2, who would you release first?
I'd release Dominique Robinson. I can't even believe he's still on this roster.
However, it's going to be Daniel Hardy.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. Of course. Yeah, I don't get to make the decisions. And as you so eloquently mentioned, Ryan Pohl's very interested in giving all of his guys 5th round and above multiple shots to prove that it was not a whiff.
Any player out there regardless of what the Bears have, but just perhaps you've had interest in them in the past, or you like the way they played in college or on another team, any player you'd be interested in the Bears bringing in that was released today or in this past week?
I'll throw out Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's a guy who has, played in some meaningful games and played meaningful snaps, and has some punt return experience. And the Bears just seem to kind of be on an eternal quest for a punt returner. Obviously, the plan was for DeAndre Carter to I think get the first crack at that when they signed him. However, we've seen a lot of guys back there, and Josh, correct me or jump in if you feel differently, but I don't feel like it's ever been definitively DeAndre Carter's job. And then in that last preseason game, he gets blocked into a punt that ends up being a turnover. And you would think that a guy with that much experience, that wouldn't happen. So I don't know, that dinged for me a little bit. So Donovan Peoples-Jones was the guy who was like, ooh, interesting. Wide receiver, can do some punt return. Josh, what are your thoughts on the punt return?
I think it's going to be Carter just because there's no other reason he's on this roster. I mean, like his wide receiver 5. He's going to get first crack at being a punt returner, but we've seen Josh Blackwell do good back there. We've seen they're definitely not sticking Velus back there. We've seen Khalil Herbert do it. So I think Carter will get first crack, but they've got options. I don't mind Donovan Peoples-Jones. What about Ken's guy, Kadarius Toney? We could just bring that to town and see how that goes. That could be a little fun. No, as far as roster cut guys, I kind of like KJ Henry, edge rusher that the Commanders cut today. He's a young guy from Clemson. As long as we're looking at dart throws to try to rush the passer, that's kind of an interesting one. And then Terrace Marshall got cut today by the Panthers, a guy who was pretty good at LSU, second, third year receiver. But there hasn't been a lot, right? There's not been a couple guys that like really pop. I mentioned Carl Lawson. Sounds like he's gonna go over to the practice squad in Dallas. There's not too much. I mean, I was kind of looking like at offensive linemen who got cut, and I remember yesterday, Patriots coach Gerard Mayo said like, "Oh, our left tackle might not be on the team," and it's like those guys are not on the waiver wire. Like if there's a starting caliber tackle, he's not getting cut, right? Like I was looking like, oh yeah, who are these guys? I don't sign any of these guys. So no offense, but I mean if they sign Josh Ball, it doesn't do much for me.
My last question, was there any player, and you already hit one for me, which wasn't a surprise, particularly when you look at all the receivers that Kansas City has brought in. Were there any players on any other rosters that you were slightly surprised that they were released? Doesn't have anything to do with the Bears.
Yeah, no, I think the one for me was Tim Patrick, wide receiver from the Broncos, who I know he had a couple injuries. I thought he looked good in the preseason. And I thought the fact that he was running with the ones, running with Bo Nix was like, okay, yeah, they're just going to have him be wide receiver 3. He's a really good blocker. And that was just Sean Payton, kind of showing him to everyone else and saying, hey, give me something. Sounds like he's probably going to the Lions, which is interesting. But I like Tim Patrick. I think he's a good versatile wide receiver. So that did surprise me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer the question you asked, but something that did surprise me today, and this is I have not followed Packers camp at all. I don't really know what the story was, but to see AJ Dillon go on IR without a designation to return, that's significant. This is a guy who, again, has played significant snaps, and when he gets the ball at times has looked physical. And it seemed like Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon could be a formidable 1-2 punch. I know they got Marshawn Lloyd, my guy from USC, waiting in the wings. So I guess it'll be next man up in Green Bay, but AJ Dillon is a dude we certainly know around here, and he will not be playing for the Packers this season unless the injury settlement loopholes and all of that. But seeing him go on IR without a designation to return, that dinged for me.
Well, could it be? With me, it wouldn't. It surprised me slightly, but also when you look at the style of play when you bring in a Josh Jacobs, I'm not saying he is the exact battering ram that AJ Dillon is, but it's more comparable than what you had before when you had Aaron Jones and you had more of a thunder and lightning approach. Even though both of them were interchangeable as far as Aaron Jones ran much more rugged than a player as slight as he is, and A.J. Dillon was a big dude that can kind of get up somewhat. For me, that just looking at Josh Jacobs kind of told me they wanted their running back to be kind of a different model or type than what Aaron Jones was in the past, in my opinion.
And then, I mean, I got one more guy. This is just like a I can't quit him guy. I don't even know if he's an NFL player, but man, Lewis Cine got cut. Lewis Cine was popping pads for the Bulldogs a couple years ago. I love Lewis Cine, man. You could talk me into Lewis Cine. I'll never get off that train. That guy can hit. I don't know if he can cover, but he can hit. So I like Lewis Cine.
You gotta have your guys.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta have your guys.
I can't quit Lewis Cine.
So some nameable cuts today, just for anybody that's watching or listening to this. We mentioned, of course, Kadarius Toney, Desmond Ridder, Frank Gore Jr., Caleb Farley, and former Bear Allen Robinson was let go. Oh, speaking of former Bears, N'Keal Harry.
Alex Leatherwood. Alex Leatherwood was let go today.
What? Who had Alex Leatherwood?
Somebody.
I think the Chargers.
I love it. Was it the Chargers?
I believe it was the Chargers.
Yeah.
No, somebody. It was somebody. It's the helmet, which is somebody on the side.
Yeah, hey, N'Keal Harry getting moved to tight end and then getting cut is just a perfect encapsulation of how far this Bears roster has come. Because 2 years ago, people were damn convinced that N'Keal Harry was going to explode here. And he caught like 4 passes and got cut. And now they have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. I mean, hey, 24 months can do it for you, man. I'll tell you that much.
Yo, those 2 practices, though, that N'Keal Harry had, where he lit it up for those 2 practices.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was good.
It was good.
Yeah. No, it was good, man. The times were good, man. You put him he's in the Chase Claypool Hall of Fame. Like, man, he could practice. It looked good. He could practice. We got on the field on Sunday. It didn't click. But damn, training camp, he big, he could go up. I like it.
People were talking so reckless about N'Keal Harry being him here.
Someone called what was it? N'Keal Harry, Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, and Velus Jones. Someone called them the Legion of Zoom. And these people need to be drug tested.
All right. Any of the Bears news that we need to talk about before we get up out of here, guys?
No, I don't think so, man. The roster's set. It's a really good roster with two pretty big question marks.
All right, listen, I know that we've been giving you our Hard Knocks review on Wednesdays. We're going to wait and drop that Thursday since Ryan Poles is going to talk. And we also got something else in the mix. I can't preview too much stuff in case it falls through, but that I will give you that. Definitely want to thank Claire and Tony and Josh and Alex. We always appreciate you all taking the time. Also, real quick, if you're going to be at the Sky game Wednesday night, this man, Alex, who put it together, Tony, and if you saw him in the background, James Naveau, we're all going to be at the Sky game. It was before, Alex. He was throwing something away. So just come around and, tell us hi or whatever if you enjoy the Sky and enjoy Under Center and, of course, Big Ten Country. We appreciate you all taking the time, and we look forward to talking to you later.
Congrats. You finished the video. If you want to build on that success, download the NBC Sports Chicago app. It's got highlights, exclusive insights, and push alerts tailored to you. Everything you need to be a real Chicago sports fan. Download it now.